My Daddy's Station. I'm Pooh. Classic radio like you always wished it could be. 101.1 FM, Eager.
101.1 FM is owned and operated by the Independence Foundation Trust as a non-profit community service.
This is the Voice of Freedom. You're listening to the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. In case some of you have lost track of what's been happening, the live broadcast of the Hour of the Time, Monday through Friday, will occur at 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern. The following day, at 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern, that broadcast will be rerun. At 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern, we're also broadcast on WRMI 9.955 megahertz worldwide shortwave radio. And between both times, we are carried by over 700 low-power FM stations across the nation and around the world. Now, tonight I'm going to be giving you I'm going to be reading to you from something that I'm really not supposed to have here. And I think it's going to make some members of the Brotherhood extremely angry that I do have it, and that I'm going to read to you from it. The only problem in my mind is, where in the world do I start? This will, of course, illuminate you and bring you the true meaning of the lost word, the lost light, the secrets hidden behind the veil. Some of you may not have the slightest idea of what I am speaking. Others of you who have been listening to this broadcast for quite some time know that this is the ancient secret doctrine of the mysteries. Now, I find it quite remarkable that the actual doctrine of the ancient pagan religions and the mystery schools is quite different from the propagandized and, again, deceptive teachings that are given to the initiates of the secret fraternities, the Illuminati, today. In fact, it has once again been twisted and turned in order to deviate people from truth, or from ever knowing the truth about what people thought was true, and what may be true, and what may not be true, to something that promotes, again, a political agenda. The political agenda is socialism. It is communism. It is trying to take us back the way that the world should never go. And the end result, of course, would be total control and manipulation of every single human being on the face of this earth, from birth to grave, every single moment of their lives. But you see, even though the ancient pagan religions and the ancient mystery teachings may not be true, there is always the possibility that some of those teachings may be true. And there is also the possibility that most of the modern great religions and churches may be just perversions of that ancient mystery religion. In fact, I can guarantee you that many of them absolutely are, and it can be proven without a doubt for those who wish to study the subject. Religion from the very beginning of man has been a method for a few to control many. Now, I'm not telling you that you should or should not believe in any religion. If you know me, folks, you know that I believe in freedom. I believe in freedom of choice. I believe in freedom to worship whatever you want to worship, even if it's a rock on the side of the road. I don't care, as long as you don't hurt the person or property of any other human being. I would hope that along the way you would hear me or someone else who is imparting truth or trying to impart truth, because truth is sometimes elusive at best. And sometimes even when we believe that we have the truth, sometimes we again have been misled. We've all been through that many times. And me probably more than most, because I have been on a quest for the truth for so many years that I don't even remember when I started, ladies and gentlemen. And it is amazing where that quest will take you. Most of you have been busy, embroiled in everyday life, embroiled in entertainment, in satisfying your senses, in falling in love and procreating and making a family and getting a job and making sure that you have enough money to feed that family and house that family. And you've been taught by many different people, starting with your parents, that that's all that life is really all about, and that you really weren't capable of doing much more than that anyway. And somehow you believed it along the way, and so you got stuck in that. And so you may not have been searching as long or as hard as I have. You may not have been down some of the alleys and dead-end streets and almost fallen off of some of the cliffs that I have almost fallen off of, and on occasion actually fallen off of, only to always come back to the straight and narrow path. And so it would behoove you to listen with an open mind and try to learn something from this. For I'm not trying to tell you that what you're going to hear is right. On the contrary, I'm going to try to tell you that this is what it is, and many people believe it, or a perversion of it. And it is what guides them in their agendas. It is their religion. Whether or not they will admit it publicly, it is their religion. And that can also be documented in their own words. So, I think I'm going to start in the middle of this. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And that's a deviation from normally what I do. But as I said, folks, I am not supposed to have this. And this is not something that is let out of the clutches of the brotherhood too often or willingly. And so I must be very careful with how I handle this and how I impart it and how much about its true nature and its source and origin as I can possibly be. And so I will. So I'm not going to ask you to trust me that this is true. You know my admonition. Listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing or anyone unless you can prove it in your own research. That is an absolute necessity in this age of deception. And look, folks, it is, without any doubt, the greatest age of deception that has ever existed on the face of this earth. Because I can tell you, quite frankly, that from the very beginning, when one man learned that he could control other men by deceiving them, deception has been rampant in this world. And if you ever thought that you lived in a world where everybody around you was honest and telling you the truth, and these people that you have in government are always telling you the truth, then you haven't grown up yet. You're still living as a child. And that's got to change very quickly. If you want to survive this great battle that is raging, ladies and gentlemen, and the great battle is raging, it's a war, as a matter of fact. And it is a quiet war, which mostly uses silent weapons, but nevertheless, it is a war. And there are casualties, and there is violence in this war, and people are destroyed. Whole families and populations are destroyed. And so, without further ado, we will get into the meat of the matter after this short intermission, which will sort of lay a little groundwork here.
Confusing, but I don't know why. But I've made my plans already. I've been troubling on all my life. The world is out they come and go. I give all my strength to be back home. There are people and why there are people how do I get to where I'm from now? How will I be discarded out the door? And I get back to where I come from. There are people who believe in life. Peace and love ain't enough these days. Evolution says time is running out. Been here too long. There are people I know. How do I get to where I come from now? How will I face this job and I'm just gone free?
Now, ladies and gentlemen, during this narrative, remember that I am reading from an esoteric revelatory book that it can only be found in the hidden libraries of the fraternal orders around the world, the secret societies which at the very top hide the full body of adepts known as the Illuminati. So pay very close attention, and you're going to learn an awful lot about what makes them tick over the next few broadcasts, and why they do and believe some of the things that they do and believe, and why they hate you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to talk about hate crimes, these people are up to their ears in hate crimes. I begin. Little could the ancient mythologists and sages have foreseen that the fabulous narrations which their genius devised to cloak high truth would end by plaguing the mind of the Western world with 16 centuries of unconscionable stultification. They could not possibly imagine that their allegorical constructions to dramatize spiritual truth would so miscarry from their hidden intent as to cast the mental life of half the world for ages under the cloud of the most grotesque superstition known to history. Nor could they have dreamed that the gross blindness and obtuseness of later epochs would cite these same marvelously ingenious portrayals as the evidence of childish crudity on the part of their formulators. Who could have suspected that a body of the most signal instrumentalities for conveying and preserving deep knowledge ever devised by man would become the means of centuries of mental enslavement? Nothing more clearly evidences the present age's loss of fixed moorings in philosophical truth than the inconsistency of its attitudes toward the sacred scriptures of antiquity. The general mind, indoctrinated by priestcraft, regards them as infallible revelations and holds them as fetishes, which it were a sacrilege to challenge, while theological scholarship hedges from pious veneration of them over to outright skepticism of their divine origin, swinging more recently to a view which takes them to be the simple conceptions of men just emerging from cave and forest barbarism. The character of divine dictation and absolute wisdom assigned to them on the one thesis has yielded to that of ignorant speculation of primitive folk on the other. That there is a possible truer characterization of them lying midway between the extravagances of these two extreme views has not seemed to come through to intelligence at any time. It has not occurred to students of religion that ancient scripts are the work neither of supreme deity on the one side, nor of groping infantile humanity on the other, but that their production must be sought in a region intermediate between the two. They came neither from supernal deity nor from common humanity, but from humanity divinized. They were the output of normal humans, graduated to divine or near divine status. St. Paul's, quote, just men made perfect, end quote. Their divinity is therefore not transcendent and exotic, and their humanity is not crude and doltish. They bear the marks, therefore, of human sagacity exalted to divine mastership. When a student graduates creditably from a college, he is presumed to have acquired a mastery over the field of knowledge covered in his course. Human life is a school, and why should not its graduates be presumed to have gained mastery over the range of knowledge which it covers, and to be able to write authoritatively upon it? Humans must at some time attain the goal, the prize of the high calling of God in Christly illumination, the crown of glorious intelligence. Life's school issues no diploma of graduation without attainment, for the graduation is the attainment. We have here the ground for the only sane acceptance of the ancient scriptures as books of accredited wisdom. We are neither asked to believe them inscribed by the finger of omnipotent deity, nor forced to attribute them to the undeveloped brains of primitives. They can be seen as the products of the sage wisdom garnered by generations of men who had finally risen to clear understanding. They are the literary heritage bequeathed by men grown to the stature of divinity. Their veneration by the world for long centuries, even carried to the extreme of outrageous sycophancy, attests an indestructible tradition of their origination from sources accredited as divine and infallible. Their successful hold on the popular mind for many ages bespeaks also the unshakable foundations of their wisdom. They have withstood consistently the test of generations of human experience. Their wisdom holds against life. It reigns true, and it is all the more precious to us because of its authorship by men of our own evolution, since thereby it does not miss immediate pertinence to our life. Both the conventional views of Bible authorship have militated against the possible high service of the Scriptures to mankind. The theory of their divine dictation to holy men of old has led to the abject surrender of the rational mind before their impregnable fortress of direct assertion, its hypnotization by a fetish, and the crippling of its native energies. The theory of their production by early crudity tends to the disparagement of the value and validity of their message. The other view here advanced preserves their venerated authority, while it brings their authorship from alleged cosmic divinity back to men of earth. It saves us from the fatuous claim that God took time out to dictate a volume of absolute verity for the inhabitants of a minor planet amongst millions of trillions of such worlds, relieving us of the necessity of asserting that supreme deity went into the book publishing business on this globe and took advantage of his commanding position to write the planet's bestseller. It preserves mental integrity by enabling us to assign scriptural authorship to human agency, where it alone is acceptable. It is understandable that evolved men with vision opened to knowledge of the laws of life would indict sage tomes for the enlightenment of those less advanced. In any case, the Bibles are here. They must be accounted for. The phenomenon of their existence among the nations, their hoary age, their escape from destruction through the centuries, the ineradicable tradition of their divine origin and authority, their almost universal veneration, must all find some factual ground of explanation. The theory offered in refutation of the two conventional ones seems the only one that provides such a rational and acceptable basis. And since the belief in their sacredness generally persists, it cannot be regarded as less than momentous that the world should know of a surety that, while these revered relics are not the voice of the personified cosmos, neither are they the mere speculative romancing of cavemen or scholastics. They are the sure word of perfected wisdom. There was a time, then, in early human history, when enlightened men possessed true knowledge, the passport to wisdom. Clear and concise answers to the profoundest problems of philosophy were known. Insofar as the human intellectual faculty is capable of it, an understanding of the mystery and riddle of life itself and the laws of its evolutionary unfolding was achieved by men who, as Hermes says, had been, quote, reborn in mind, end quote. Philosophy was no more, quote, speculative enterprise, end quote, or tilting at logical windmills. It was a statement of the fundamental archai, or basic principles of the science of being. It formed the groundwork for the elevation of theology to its true place as the king of sciences, or the kingly science. Together, philosophy and theology held the throne in the mental life of mankind, and justly so, for a reason which modern thought would do well to consider. They must ever be the ultimate science because they motivate finally the use we make of all other sciences. They hold final answers to all life's problems. They are the determiners of all human action in the end. They alone can direct man finally to the path of good, or by no other means can he learn to know what constitutes the good. The sore need of the world today is the restoration of philosophy to supply the proper motivation and end of action. Though zealously guarded from the unworthy by its accredited custodians, knowledge was extant in the ancient day. Modern zeal for publicity finds it hard to understand why it was so sedulously kept esoteric. Briefly, for the full reason is a lengthy matter, a thing so precious, the distillation of ages of experience and the deposit of many lives of painful earning could not be given out loosely to the undisciplined rabble to be violated and despoiled. Yet it was withheld from no worthy aspirant. No bars of bigotry or persecution interdicted its free culture. The societies in which it was secretly pursued were honored by kings and the populace alike. That halcyon age passed. That priceless legacy of knowledge was threatened with extinction. Its pursuit was forbidden. Its devotees assailed and exterminated. And for more than 15 centuries, the Occidental world has muddled through its age-to-age existence in nearly total ignorance of the fact that antiquity held in its philosophy and theology an adequate answer to the great interrogatory, the Sphinx riddle of human life. And as an aside here, folks, I have discussed the riddle of the Sphinx on past broadcasts, and I have told you the truth about what the Sphinx represents. And those of you who are quick and understood the symbology will make that connection again here. I continue. The gift and then the loss of primal wisdom are the two most momentous events in human history. This age will be spectator to the third most significant event, the renaissance of ancient culture. The plans of demigods and divine men, interrupted for 15 centuries of the Dark Ages, will move forward again toward destined goals, the completion of the great work. This age faces the denouement of a drama the like of which has not been unrolled in world history before and will hardly be repeated in aeons. Tragedy and comedy being copiously admixed in mortal existence, the astounding spectacle to which the world will shortly awake will exhibit untold calamity and the ludicrous conjoined in incredible fashion. We are destined soon to pass from a stunning sense of tragic loss to a world-echoing burst of laughter. The sting of our realization of our duo millennial loss will melt away under the dawning recognition of our previous unbelievable stupidity. We are in a little time to be made acutely aware of a situation that will become the butt of hollow mirth for ages to come. Other egregious follies of history can be accepted or extenuated to the point of being condoned and forgotten. But this colossal ineptitude, prolonged over 16 centuries, cannot escape being laughed at for centuries more. A joke owes its character to the miscarriage of the intended sense into something ludicrously different. This denouement will stand as the historical joke of the ages. No less than this quantity of hilarity can balance the weight of the tragedy which loads the joke at the other end. For the ludicrously different direction in which the intended sense of the great mythical religions and dramatic rituals of the past took its perverted course entailed as a consequence the greatest of all historical out of the miscarriage of the concealed meaning of the ancient spiritual myth. The transaction carried the form of a joke, but it also carried the substance of the most appalling terrorism in history. And this most calamitous of all blunders was the mistaking of religious myth, drama, and allegory for veridical history. The promise of our coming awakening. The promise of our coming awakening lies in the progress made and to be made in the study of comparative religion, comparative mythology, and comparative philology. What they will ere long make clear to us beyond further dispute is the most unthinkable fact that for 16 centuries the best intelligence of the West took the ancient sages' books of wisdom, which were in all cases the spiritual dramatizations of the experience of the human soul on earth, for objective historical narratives. The spectacle that will soon throw a world first into wonder, confusion, and dismay, and then into clownish laughter, is that of a civilization covering 1/3 of the globe, and boasting itself as the highest in culture in the historical period, all the while taking its moral and spiritual guidance for an aeon from a book or books of the true content and meaning of which it never for one moment has had the slightest inkling.
some man can tell me, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my faith. Baby, to me you're like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Won't you tell me that not today? Take your love, the first night, my eyes become alive and no light to keep shy and I can bring you to a tear from a rose on the grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it seems in the air. Now that your roses and blue, I like it to bloom on the grave. So much a man can tell me, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my faith. You are like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Now won't you tell me that happy baby? Take your love, the first night, my eyes become alive and the light that you shine can't be seen.
You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper, and I'm reading to you from a jealously guarded, esoteric tome that comes right out of the heart of the mysteries. This is, ladies and gentlemen, what you're hearing and what you will hear over the next several broadcasts, the heart and soul of the truth of the mystery religions that gave birth to socialism, communism, humanism, and is at war, totally and completely at war with all the other religions of the earth. Their goal is to completely destroy all existing nation-states, all existing churches and religions, and to shackle the mob in a system of world totalitarian socialist government. And so you had better listen to this. The superior knowledge vouchsafed from early graduates in life's school to disciplined pupils in the mysteries of old was transmitted from generation to generation by oral teaching and preserved only in memory. But later, lest it be lost or corrupted, it was consigned to writing. Hence came the sacred books of Scriptures, Holy Writ of antiquity. So highly were they held in the esteem of early men that when in later days their true origin and character had been forgotten, they were exalted to the position of veritable fetishes and assigned a quite preternatural source and rating. Regarded as books of superhuman intelligence, men have in face of them practically set in abeyance their human reason and bowed to them as the oracles of absolute truth. This was natural and to a degree inevitable, but it spelled catastrophe to the general mental life of man by fixing upon him the basest hypnotization in all the annals of record, when a literal and historical instead of a purely spiritual and typical interpretation of the books was broadcast to general acceptance. The evidence is mountain high that the taking of ancient ritual dramas and scriptural myths for objective history and the figures in them for human persons has been the fountain source of the most abject corruption of man's mental forces since the race began. In mechanical exploit, this is an age of marvel. and credit for this type of achievement should not be withheld. In study of life and its objective powers, it has labored with wondrous accomplishment. In psychological delving into deeper phases of consciousness, it has begun a pursuit long neglected. But in religion and philosophy, it is one of the blindest of ages. It is not overstating the case to say that in these areas of human enterprise, the mind of this era still slumbers in a state of ineptitude and gross darkness, at least a degree or two below that commonly termed barbaric. At this moment, the common mentality of the day, led and fed by a compactly institutionalized ecclesiastical power, stands committed to ideas as to the origin, structure, meaning, and destiny of life, which have not been surpassed in crudity and chimerical absurdity by the tribes of the forest and the sea isles. Conceptions in theology, having to do with basic realities of man's relation to the universe, are still presented in pulpits, Sunday schools, and theological seminaries, which the uncorrupted native intelligence of children of 8 and 10 years shrinks from or accepts with startled dismay, to the subsequent confusion of their whole mental integrity. A scheme of explanation of cosmic processes and world design, of human and angelic relations, of the plan and purport of life itself, is advanced for popular acceptance, yet it is grotesque to common sense and fantastic to rational thought. Philosophy and religion are still propagated on the basis of a theology that is received without understanding by the common people, entirely repudiated by the intelligentsia, and brazenly dissembled by the very priesthood that lips its cantos and its oracles from Sunday to Sunday. In sum, it can be said without the remotest possibility of successful dispute that the general grasp of the mind of this age on philosophical verity and the truth of life, as proffered by orthodox religionism, is still steeped in the crassest forms of dark superstition, and this has been due to the miscarriage of ancient symbolism. History would seem to present a pattern of retrogressive current if it can be shown that this late epoch grovels in a mire of semi-barbaric philosophical grossness from which a former period was free. Degeneracy must have set in at some distant time and swept onward to this day, and such a phenomenon must have had its due cause. A great work of a learned author some years ago pointed to the approaching, quote, decline of the West, end quote. What has not been seen, however, is that the West has long been in decline, is at a low stage of decay, and has not risen out of the murks of the Dark Ages. This has come in the wake of causes long operative in the world situation, which have been overlooked or failed of discovery through an egregious obscuration of the vision of scholars since the early centuries. And if this failure of insight is not to be attributed to stupidity that is in itself beyond understanding, then it becomes necessary for the historian of these things to posit for it another cause, one that casts the dark shadow of sinister motive over the whole course of that historical enterprise in which sinister motive is of all places most unpardonable. Corruption in politics or in economic or social life can be understood in relation to the imperfection of human nature, and in a measure pardoned. But designed corruption in religion is shattering to the very foundations of human aspiration. It shocks and paralyzes fundamental urges to sincerity. It weights the human spirit with the hopelessness of its effort to conquer imperfection. Dishonesty and insincerity in worldly dealings may entail disaster of greater or minor degree. In religion, they are never less than fatal. There is one domain in which untruth is unsupportable, that field of the human soul's endeavor of which truth is the very substance and being: religion. whether stupidity or sinister design prove to have been the cause of the loss of true original meaning, must be left to the historical sequel to disclose. And whether the cause of the perpetuation of rank superstition in the present day of alleged enlightenment is to be laid at the door of ignorance or knavery, or a combination of both, must likewise be determined as time moves on. It is certain that both the primal and the present causes of nescience are kindred, if not identical. It is the purpose of the present volume to set forth to the modern mind the extent of the wreckage which splendid ancient wisdom suffered at the hands of later incompetence. And it is designed to accomplish this by setting up the sharp contrast between the present disfigurement and the past glory of the structure. This purpose entails the task of revealing for the first time the hidden meaning of the body of archaic scriptures by means of a clear and lucid interpretation of their myths and allegories, fables and dramas, astrological pictographs, and numerological outlines. It will be at once seen to be a labor of no mean proportions to convert the entire mass of antique mythology and legend, biblical glyph and cryptogram, from presumed childish nonsense into an organic corpus of transcendent scientific significance. It involves the reversal of that mental process which in the days of early Christianity operated to change myth and allegory in the first instance over to factual history. As third-century ignorance converted mythical typology to objective history, the task is now to convert alleged objective history back to mythology, and then to interpret it as enlightened theology. The almost insuperable difficulty of the project will consist in demonstrating to an uncomprehending world, mistaught for centuries and now fixed in weird forms of fantastic belief, that the sacred scriptures of the world are 1,000 times more precious as myths than as alleged history. It can only be done by showing that as myths they illumine and exalt the mind to unparalleled clarity, while as assumed history they are either nonsensical or inconsequential. But centuries of erroneous indoctrination have so warped and victimized the modern mind that the effort to restore the scriptures to their primal mythical status will be met with the objection that the transaction will wipe the Bible and other sacred literature out of the realm of value altogether. In the common mind, this would be to rob them of worth and significance utterly. So wretchedly has the ancient usage of the religious myth been misunderstood that the cry, quote, "The Bible only a myth," end quote, will fall upon the popular ear with all the catastrophic force and finality of the tolling of a death knell. And no statement that words can phrase will stand as a more redoubtable testimony to the correctness of this estimate of the present stupefaction of modern intelligence concerning religious philosophy than just this reaction. Ridicule, contempt, and flat rejection will be the greeting accorded the proclamation that biblical myth is truer and more important than biblical history. Our book aims at nothing less than the full proof of this contention. It flies directly in the face of the awaiting scorn of common opinion on the point at issue. Yet nothing is easier than to demonstrate that Bible material taken as history is the veriest nonsense. Anyone with an analytic mind and an imagination to convert its narratives into realism can make it a laughing stock. The Voltaires, Paines, Ingersolls, and the Freethinkers have done this successfully enough. But having disproved it as history, they have not redeemed it as spiritual mythology. The world awaits this work of interpretation, and only when it is supplied will the full force of the tragic humor of mistaking drama for history be grasped. The loss or corruption of the philosophical interpretation of ancient scriptures precipitated the West into the Dark Ages, and a main factor in this disaster was a general obscuration of intelligence concerning the myth. Catastrophe was made the more readily possible because the rationale of the use of the myth in ancient hands passed from knowledge. When the recondite suggestiveness of the myth was lost, the inner essence of esoteric wisdom was dissipated away. Philosophy died out, and, bereft of its inner soul, the myth came to stand as the mere ghost of itself. With its hidden significance gone, it read nonsense and caricature, and so it has stood till this day. The word connotes in the popular mind of the present something about equivalent to fairy tale, a fiction little removed from a hoax. It is something that is sheer fanciful invention. To declare a narrative formerly believed to be true only a myth is to toss it out on the rubbish heap as a thing no longer of value. And this attitude of mind toward the myth is itself the sign and seal of the decadence of this age, and truly the mark of the beast. For ancient sagacity could hardly have assumed that any succeeding age would prove so obtuse as to take the outward form of its spiritual allegories for factual occurrence, or suppose that their formulators believed them to be true objectively. To be sure, they are fanciful creations and entirely fictitious. They are fables of events which as events never happened. The aim was never at any time to deceive anybody. It was never imagined that anybody would ever believe them. Nevertheless, the myth was designed to tell truth of the last importance. Its instrument was fancy, but its purpose was not falsehood, but sublime truth. Outwardly, it was not true, but at the same time, it portrayed full truth. It was not true for its characters, but was true for all mankind. It was only a myth, but it was a myth of something. It used a false story to relate a true one, and thus maintained the secret doctrine within the brotherhood, while those who read it, who were not initiates, never saw the truth of the myth. While it never happened, it is the type of all things that have happened and will happen. It is not objective history, but it embalms the import and substance, the heart's core of all human history. Such authors as Spengler and Lord Raglan have begun to see that the ancients regarded it of far less importance to catalog the occurrences of objective history than to dramatize its inner spirit. The outward actions of humans are in the main trivial, because they constitute in the end only a partial and ephemeral account of the whole verity. Ancient literature aimed at something infinitely higher and more universal. It strove to depict in the myths and dramas the eternal norms of life experience, which would stand as truth for all men at any time in evolution. The myths were cryptographs of the great design and pattern of human history, lining in the large the truth that is only in fragmentary fashion brought to living enactment in any given set of historical circumstances. The myth is always truer than history. Only in aeons will history have caught up with the myth, when it will have unfolded the entire design of the original mythograph. Hegel indeed essayed to read the features of a grand cosmic design in the straggling line of actual events, but the myth already foreshadows the ultimate meaning of history. Now, such being the portentous function of the myth in the early stages of the life of humanity, it becomes in some degree apparent what blindness must have fallen upon the mental eye of practically a whole world to have blotted out in little more than a single century the knowledge of a thing of such vast utility. No matter how conclusively the data may prove the fact, it will probably remain forever incomprehensible to unstudied folk that whole bodies of ancient mythology and spiritual typology suddenly became metamorphosed into alleged history. It is incredible enough in all conscience. It has been the supreme tragedy of history, and because it ensued through sheer gaucherie and clumsy, loutish dumbness, it will, as predicted, rise on our horizon as the supreme folly of the ages, when it is realized that an early gift of divine wisdom, planned to aid the race fight through the exigencies of its historical evolution, totally miscarried into tragic nonsense through the simple mistake of taking spiritual allegory for literal history. A humiliated world will find difficulty in ridding its memory of this preposterous blunder. And that's as far as we can go tonight, folks, because we're just about out of time. We will continue tomorrow at the same time, 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern. And of course, this broadcast tonight will rerun tomorrow at 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern, and it will not be on shortwave. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you learned a little bit tonight, and that you will continue to learn from this in future broadcasts, and that you are taking in the spirit that it is intended to educate you as to what the secret doctrine really is. You see, Blavatsky is one of the propagandists, one of the deceivers, one of the manipulators. She didn't even come close. But you have to understand what Blavatsky wrote in order to understand secular humanism. Good night, and God bless each and every single one of you.
There's no reason for you to lose your mind, 'cause I've seen something that's gonna change our time. If I could, I'd make you understand. If I could, I'd make you understand. There's no hurry, it's gonna come for sure. I know that someday we're gonna end our war. If I could, I'd make you understand. If I could, I'd make you
This is the Voice of Freedom. You're listening to the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network. Stay tuned now for all oldies most of the time. Classic radio like you always wished it could be. Only the very best of the best.